नमो तस् भगवतो अरहतो सम्मा सम्बुद्धस्स। नमो तस् भगवतो अरहतो सम्मा सम्बुद्धस्स। नमो तस् भगवतो अरहतो सम्मा सम्बुद्धस्स. So, to carry on with our studies, we are at the book number 7 among the 8 books of the Buddha and His Dhamma, and we have been studying the part 1 of the book 7 of this wonderful book. And today I am going to talk about the sub part 3 and sub part 4 of the Buddha and His Dhamma. So let's begin with the subpart 3 is about meeting of those near and dear. So the Buddha, before his Mahaparinibban, had met some of the prominent people in his life, and today we are going to look at that. So the subpart 3 is titled as Last Meeting Between Mother and Son and Between Wife and Husband. So here the reference is to Mahaprajapati and Yashodhara. So we know that Yashodhara and Mahaprajapati walked all the way down from Kushinagar to Vaishali to meet the Buddha, and they sought to become bhikshunis, and they become bhikkhunis, and they attained the fruits of practicing the Buddha's path. And at the end of their life, this is how they met their teacher, the Buddha. So before their death, Mahaprajapati and Yashodhara met the Blessed Lord. Now it was probably their last meeting with him, and they knew, both the parties knew that, it might be the last meeting. So Mahaprajapati went and first worshipped him. So as verse number 3 says, that Mahaprajapati went to the Buddha and she paid his obeisance to the Buddha. She worshipped him. And she thanked him for having given her the happiness of the good doctrine. So, she had this profound happiness that one experiences by following the Dhamma. And for her having been spiritually born through him, this is a very important word because, physically, Buddha was born to Mahamaya. He was raised by his foster mother, Mahaprajapati, and Mahaprajapati Gautami is now saying to him, something very interesting, that she was born through him spiritually. So the spiritual birth of the Buddhists teach through the Buddha, because the Buddha gives them a new birth, a new life. And therefore, in the Buddhist tradition, the Buddhist bhikshus or the Buddhist upasakas were called the Shakya Putras and the Shakya Putris, and Shakya Dhuta or Shakya Dhita. And this is very interesting to hear from the very mother of the Buddha, that she is telling him that she was born spiritually through him, and for the doctrine having grown in her through him. So whatever the Dhamma that she has learned it through the Buddha and through his teaching, gradual teachings. For her having suckled him, and she has drank the milk of the Dhamma from the Buddha, drinking the Dhamma milk of him. For her having plunged in and crossed over the ocean of becoming through him, and she has crossed the ocean of suffering through him. And she says, what a glorious thing it has been to be known as the mother of the Buddha. She has such a glory in declaring herself the mother of the Buddha. And I think this Yashodhara's response to the Buddha is very, very clear way of expressing the gratitude to the Buddha and being proud of called the Buddha's mother. And then she uttered a plea, she made a plea. And this verse is very interesting, the verse number 5. I desire to die finally, having put away this corpse. So she wants to die now. She's wants to put away her corpse, her body. And very interestingly, she says, "Oh, sorrow ender, permit me." So the Buddha is also called the ender of the sorrow, and she asked the permission of the Buddha to die, to attain to parinirvana of her own. The people who have attained to certain goals in their life by practicing the Buddha Dhamma, their death is very interesting because they are very aware of their process of death, and she's seeking the permission of the Buddha to die. And she's addressing the Buddha. One of the epithets of the Buddha is the ender of the sorrow, oh sorrow ender. So I read the verse number 5 again. I desired to die, finally, having put away this corpse. Oh sorrow ender, permit me. That's what the permission Mahaprajapati takes. Now, from the verse number 6 onwards, it's about Yashodhara. And bear these things in mind when we are looking at Yashodhara. So Yashodhara also went to the Buddha and addressing the Blessed Lord said that she was in her 78 years. So she was fairly old. She was 78 years old. The Blessed Lord replied that he was in his 80s. See, now the Buddha is 2 years younger to Yashodhara according to this verse. And the Buddha is also, at the last stage of his life, because we know that the Buddha died at the age of 80. So, the Yashodharas died the same time as we can gaze from this verse number 6. Now, she told him that she was to die that very night. Now, it's very interesting that she didn't take the permission of the Buddha to die. She told him that she was to die that very night. Her tone was more self-reliant than that of Mahaprajapati. So, Yashodhara, there are a lot of, literary works on Yashodhara where, the Yashodhara's life is sketched, whereas a young woman, when she was, the Buddha went for the search of the truth, how she was, and then when she became Bhikshuni, how she was and how she attained the fruits of the enlightenment. And there are a lot of texts about Yashodhara. And the Yashodhara that we begin to understand as a human being is somebody who is very strong, somebody who is self-reliant. And as Baba Sahib mentions here in the verse number 7, her tone was more self-reliant than that of Mahaprajapati. She did not ask his permission to die, nor did she go to him to seek him as refuge. And this is very important. Because, the Buddha was an enlightened being and people went to seek refuge in the Buddha. But once you are enlightened, you take your own refuge in yourself. And this is a remarkable verse number 8. Following from the verse number 7, she did not ask his permission to die, nor did she go to him to seek him as her refuge. On the contrary, she said to him, Me sarnang atthano. I am my own refuge. And this is very significant 3 words. And it shows the kind of the freedom attained by the women of that period. They were, and if we study Therigata, we can see that there were many women who had attained that freedom, that fruits of Nibbana. They have experienced the ultimate liberation. And by way of that, they have become their own refuge. They didn't need to depend on anybody for their refuge, for their security, because they have realized the Buddha within themselves. They have realized that mind which is stainless. They have realized the mind which is free from all the poisons, and they have realized the very nature of everything. So verse number 9 says, she had conquered all the cankers in her life. So she has conquered all the cankers in her life, and she came to thank him because it was he who had shown her the way and given her the power. Now, I think this verse number 10 needs a lot of reflection. I think in terms of how Baba Ambedkar has put it here. She came to thank the Buddha. Yashodhara came to thank the Buddha. And because the Buddha has shown her the way. Now see, the Buddha has shown her the way and given her the power. So see, this language is very interesting, to the language of power, the language of being empowered, the language of being, self-sufficient, the language of being confident within oneself, the fact that Yashodhara was liberated, that she no longer needed to, surrender herself even to the Buddha. because she had in her own, if through her own efforts, become the Buddha herself. And that freedom has given her the tremendous power that she had become her own agency. She had become her own sort of own master. She had mastered her mind, and she has become her own master. And of course, the Buddha is important because the Buddha is the giver of the way. He's a margadata. He has given us a Dhamma, a very precious Dhamma that is very rare to find. And we have to be grateful to the Buddha all the time. But the power that is, that the practice of the Dhamma gives us, has a liberating quality, and, it can make us our own masters. So what I found interesting about this meeting between the mother and the son, the Buddha and Mahaprajapati, and the Buddha and Yashodhara, it shows the kind of power, the kind of attainments, or the kind of freedom that the women at the time of the Buddha has achieved. And they are not, they were near and dear to the Buddha. They were Buddha's relatives. But at the same time, we find the mention of many women in the Buddhist Sangha who had attained to that freedom. And, they were sometimes more radical than the men. If we read, compare the Therigatha and Theragatha, and we feel that they were a very deep challenge to the established Brahminical order. And when the counter revolution took place, the women were again subdued by the orthodoxy. So from the subpart number 3, we will now launch on to the subpart 4, last meeting between father and son. So I think this is a very interesting subpart that has been included here. It's between the Buddha and Rahula, and we know that Rahula became Shramanira at a very early age, and he was trained by Sariputra. He was himself a liberated man, and he had similarly attained to the Nibbana. And this last meeting between the father and son is also very interesting, and it happened in Rajagraha, in the bamboo grove. Rahul was staying at Ambalattika. See, so there is this Veduvana, bamboo grove, and there Rahula met. So the blessed one arising towards Eventude from his meditation went over to Rahula, who seeing the Lord some way off, set a seat for him and water to wash his feet. So, as there was a tradition to arrange the seat for the teacher and arrange the water for him, so similarly Rahula did it. And sitting himself on the seat set for him, the Lord poured water. So Lord sat and he poured water over his feet, while Rahula, after salutation, took his seat to one side. Now, this is the time, this is the context in which this conversation took place. And this conversation is very important. It's very important for us to understand this conversation, because it brings out something very unique to Buddhism. And we are going to look at it. And this particular sutra, Rahulavada Sutra, is also one of the sutras that Ashoka mentioned on his royal edicts. And the title of the sutra is about Rahula Sutta. But very interestingly, the very interesting practice that Buddha cultivated, which is called the Paccavekkhana, reflection, and how the morality is created through the reflection or through knowledge. So the Pali term for it is Paccavekkhana. And we are going to look at the process of Paccavekkhana as the Buddha taught to Rahula. So addressing Rahula, the Blessed Lord said, now pay attention very carefully. This is a very interesting sort of a thing that the Buddha taught Rahula. So addressing Rahula, the Blessed Lord said, he who does not shrink from deliberate lying has not, say I, left undone any evil thing which he could. See, telling a lie means not being able to tell what is not true, or, to hide something. And, whenever we have this tendency to hide something, not to be able to tell what it is, the truth, and if we do it deliberately, with conscious mind, if we deliberately lie, then we are capable of doing any evil thing. So see, in other words, the Buddha is teaching Rahula to be honest with whatever he has done. And I think that's very interesting. So the verse 4 And the last sentence is very interesting. Therefore, you must school yourself never to tell a lie, even in a jest, even in jest. So even while, talking to other people, even in jokes, we should not tell a lie. And that's what the Buddha is asking him to train himself. The Buddha is saying to Rahula that he should train himself not to tell a lie, not to tell a deliberate lie. And that's a training, isn't it? There are a lot of now good books on lying. Why do we lie? Why do we not tell, the way it is, or, the very essence of lying? It goes on to the psychological deception of ourselves and others with a motive to gain something for us. And that's why, the verse number 4 has a very deep meaning, and I'm going to read it again. Addressing Rahula, the blessed Lord said, he who does not shrink from deliberate lying has not, say I, left undone any evil thing which he could. Therefore, you must school yourself never to tell a lie, even in jest. Even while talking, even in jokes, we should not tell a lie. And what should one do? So the Buddha says, in the same way, you must reflect. And again, in doing every act, in speaking every word, and thinking every thought. So, there are 3 ways by which the human being is conceptualized Buddhism as kaya, vacha, and man, body, speech, and mind. And the body acts. We act through our body. If you want to, even when the violence is born here, we do some action to thrash somebody. So for that, the body is needed. So body does the action, the mouth or the speech does the speaking, and the speech has a tremendous power. We know that the speech can kill or heal people, isn't it? It has such a tremendous power over the world. And the thoughts are very important. So what the Buddha is saying that you must reflect. So we should reflect while doing every act. So not a single act by the body is committed without reflection, without paccavekkhana, without reflecting back on your mind. No word is uttered without, reflection. And no thought is thought without reflection. So the process of reflection is very important in the Buddha's teaching, and it tends to bring out what the term reflective morality, that the morality is reflective, it is not just the code of conduct. It is not just the rules that we stick to as some kind of the laws. And sometimes the context might demand that we act in certain way, or we speak in certain way, or we think in certain ways. And there are, we can think about, the ethical system is reflective, in a sense that we have to reflect on while we speak every single word, while we do every single act of the body, or every thought we think. So now the criteria or the standard to judge how we act, or how we speak, or how we think is very beautifully clearly mentioned in the verse number 6. So when you want to do anything, you must reflect whether it would conduce to your own, your or others' harm, or to both. So you see, when we reflect like this, we should think that whatever I'm going to do, whatever I'm going to speak, whatever I'm going to think, is it going to lead to the harm of myself and others, or both? See, me, other, and both, isn't it? So, it's a very inclusive sort of a morality. It's not just, self-sacrifice, or it is not just, sacrificing others for your happiness. It's in other words, think about, in an inclusive manner, in a total manner, about the welfare of all. Bahujan hitaya, bahujan sukhaya. And so is a wrong act productive of ooh and ripening into ooh. So if we act in this way, as it causes harm to yourself and to others and to both, then that act is producing the suffering, is producing, it will ripen into suffering. If reflection tells you that this is the nature of that contemplate act, you should not do it. So after reflecting, you think that this is going to do this harm, this ooh, then we should not do it. But Buddhism is not about non-doing, it's about also doing. But if reflection as you assures you there is no harm but good in it, then you may do it. So after reflection, you think that this act, this thought, or this word is going to be helpful to and bring no harm to yourself and others and both, then you should do it. And these 8 to 13 verses are kind of pointing out to the practices that we must be able to do. So what are the practices? Grow in loving kindness. So grow metta in you. So grow metta in you, because as you practice the metta, the malevolence will pass away. So you see, the anecdote of malevolence is loving kindness or metta. So as we grow in metta, the feeling of malevolence disappears. It loosens its hold on us. So the metta is very important. So the Buddha says, grow in loving kindness, cultivate loving kindness. Why? Because the malevolence will pass away. Whatever negative intentions we have, they will pass away. Metta. Grow in compassion, karuna. For as you do so, vexation will pass away. We get vexed or irritated or too much swayed here and there. And if we want to get rid of that mental state, we have to grow, we have to cultivate karuna, compassion. Grow in gladness over others' welfare. So if other people have doing well in their life, doing good in their life, which should gladden our heart. And that is called mudita. So grow in mudita. For as you do so, aversion will pass away. The hatred in our mind, the aversion in our mind will pass away. The competition in our mind will pass away. How? If we grow ourselves, if we cultivate mudita. Grow in poised equanimity, upekha. For as you do so, all repugnance will pass away. So equanimity is very important. It is the highest stage. That's that of the freedom. And whatever repugnance we have, it will pass away. So in other words, the verse number 7, 8, 9, 10, the verse number 8, 9, 10, 11 is asking us to practice the fourfold supreme abodes. Metta, Karuna, Mudita, Upekha. And that is what the Buddha taught to Rahula. Isn't it? The reflection, the criteria for reflection, and then the mental state, the emotive mental state that one needs to cultivate. Metta, Karuna, Mudita, and Upekha are very much important in Buddhism to practice these 4 supreme abodes. Now, verse number 12 is also about practice. Grow in contemplation of the body's corruption. For as you do so, passion will pass away. You see, if we contemplate on our body, and if we contemplate what is called the Ashubha, the Buddha has an analytical method to understand our body and its corruptions or its impurity. All our senses or all they are leaking all the time. And inside the body, if we bring our body inside, if we unfold our body inside out, isn't it? It's not beautiful to look at, isn't it? And we have doctors in our group, and they can tell us, how the body is impure. The Buddha is saying that we have to contemplate on the body's corruption. Isn't it? So for as you do so, passion will pass away. We have so much raging passions within us, and the passions are like the fire. So if we want to extinguish the fire of passion, what we need to do is meditate on the body's corruption. And the last but important point is grow in the perception of fleeting nature of things. Grow in the perception of anicca. For as you do so, the pride of self will fall away. Isn't it? The self is problematic that we construct all the time, putting ourselves at the center of the world all the time, me, mine, and myself. And the Buddha says that if we contemplate on the fleeting nature of the things, when we realize in ourselves that things arise and pass away, we no longer are proud. Our mana, the pride is in the Buddhist context is called the mana, isn't it? And when the mana is broken, we are free. So you see, the pride is very interesting to let go of, because without doing So in order to let go of the pride, we have to contemplate the very nature of impermanence of all the things. All the things are fleeting. And when we are talking about all the things are fleeting, the pride of the self goes away. So this is what the Buddha taught to Rahula when they met last time. And I think this is very important teaching of the Buddha that we see here. I think even if we understand this much of Buddhism, Paccavekkhana, it gives us a practical sort of a model to train ourselves in the Buddha's teachings. So I'm going to come to the last subsection of this part. And this is also very, very important teaching for us to look into. So last meeting between the Buddha and Sariputra. So Sariputra was very dear to the Buddha. He was a spiritual heir to the Buddha in a way. The Buddha believed and Buddha trusted Sariputra so much. And Sariputra had a very good friend, Mahamoglayan. And Sariputra and Mahamoglayan, they were like the senapatis of the Buddha. Buddha was a Dhamma king, the Dhamma Raja, and his senapatis were Sariputra and Moglayan. And Sariputra was a very learned man. He played a very important role in Buddhism. He used to bring the teachings together. He used to categorize the teaching together. He used to teach a lot of monks, novices, and in a way, he was somebody who was, like we can say, next to the Buddha in his understanding of the Dhamma. And he was a very learned man, as we have seen in the previous classes, that whenever Buddha was not feeling well, he asked Sariputra to resume his talk. And Sariputra was elder to the Buddha, and Moglayan was elder to the Buddha, but they had a very special bonding and very special friendship, which we can call Kalyan Mitra. They were very close to each other. And this part is very interesting from that point of view, which I'm going to read and reflect on what the Buddha has, Buddha and, how the Buddha and Sariputra had this beautiful friendship. So this incident took place in Shravasti and in Jetavana in the Gandhakuti. So Gandhakuti, where the Buddha lived in a kuti, and the place where the Buddha lived is called the kuti. And because it was a fragrant kuti, the Buddha wherever Buddha dealt is called the Mula Gandhakuti. So Mula Gandhakuti is the basic kuti which we can find in Sarnath, and there were a lot of kutis everywhere where the Buddha used to stay. So Buddha was staying in Shravasti, the Jetavana, and even we can go today to Jetavana, and maybe we are not able to find the Gandhakuti, but there is a small place which is called the Gandhakuti Vihar if we go to Shravasti. So Sariputra arrived there with a company of 500 brethren. So where the Buddha was in Shravasti, Sariputra came with 500 brethren, 500 monks. He arrived in Shravasti. Imagine the number. 500 people, Sariputra was teaching at that time. And after saluting the Buddha, Blessed One, Sariputra told him that the last day of his life on earth has arrived. Will the Blessed Lord be pleased to permit him to give up his mortal coils? Very touching, these sections of the Buddha and His Dhamma are full of insights, full of teachings, but at the same time very touching. It brings the Buddha alive to us. This is the Buddha which is lost in the symbols and in the statues and the images. But the Buddha that Baba Ambedkar has given us here, he's a human Buddha. He's a, we can relate to him. We can feel him. We can see that, how, we can visualize his presence, the human Buddha, the Shakyamuni Buddha. And I find these sections very, very important, to go back and reflect. And as it goes like this, that after saluting the Venerable One, Blessed One, Sariputra told him that the last day of his life on earth has arrived. Will the Blessed Lord be pleased to permit him to give up his mortal coils? So the mortal coil, the body of Sariputra, he wants to give up now. He wants to die, and the death is not the word for them. Parinibban is the word for them. So for his Parinibban, Sariputra told the Blessed One. So the Blessed Lord asked Sariputra if he had selected any place for his Parinibban. There people talk, lot things about Nibbana, Parinibbana, and Mahaparinibbana. They are the same, We don't have to make a lot of things about that. They are just like, emphasis, but in the essence, they are the same. So, Sariputra told the Blessed One, I was born in the village Nalaka in Magadha, that is Nalanda. And Nalanda has even today the stupa of Sariputra. So, Sariputra told the Blessed One, I was born in the village Nalaka in Magadha. The house in which I was born still stands. I have chosen my home for my Parinibbana. He says that I have chosen my home for my Parinibbana. The Lord replied. How does Lord reply? You see, dear Sariputra, he says, my dear Sariputra, do what pleases you. You see, these two words. Dear Sariputra, do what pleases you. See, once you have a confidence in a person, we let them do what they would like to do. So when we attain to independence, we don't know long, and we know that Sariputra was independent, Sariputra was free, Sariputra was awakened, Sariputra had penetrated, experienced the Nibbana, he has followed the path, practiced the path taught by the Buddha to its fullest possible level, and he was a free man. And the Lord replied, dear Sariputra, see love, and at the same time allowing him to do whatever he can. Sariputra fell on the feet of the Blessed Lord. You see, now see the scene. Imagine the scene. Sariputra fell on the feet of the Blessed Lord and said, I have practiced the paramitas for 1,000 kalpas with only one wish, to have the honor of falling on your feet. See, devotion. You see, the placing the heart into the Buddha is so important. It is the heart of the Buddhist practice to place ourselves, to this highest possibility that there exists in any human being to become the Buddha. And you see, this is a very, why this act of Sariputra falling at the feet of the Buddha is important, because he's saying something very important. He says that I have practiced the paramitas for 1,000 kalpas with only one wish. The Shraddha, when the metta becomes, is cultivated for something higher, it becomes Shraddha. And the Shraddha of Sariputra, we can see it very clearly. I have practiced the paramitas for 1,000 kalpas with only one wish, to have the honor of falling on your feet. I have achieved that end, and there is no end to my happiness. Surrendering the Buddha, falling at his feet. The Dharma Senapati, one of the most intelligent man of the time. The philosopher par excellence, the teacher par excellence, the man who has attained to freedom, Nibbana, is falling at the feet of the Buddha and is telling him that this was my only wish to do. I have practiced the paramita with only one wish, to fall at your feet, Lord. And I have achieved that end, and there is no end to my happiness. That has gladdened my heart so much that I cannot tell you. Now the Buddha says, no, this smacks at a lot of things. What the Buddha says. We do not believe in rebirth. You see, we are not going to come back again. Therefore, this is our last meeting, and this is our last meeting. Let the Lord forgive me my faults. Even at this stage, the enlightened being Sariputra is telling the Buddha, the supremely enlightened one, to forgive me if there are any faults. Isn't it? This is what is the heart that we need to cultivate, isn't it? To accept the faults, to accept the wrongdoings that we have done. My last day has come. Even at the last day, Sariputra was this man of integrity. Sariputra, there is nothing to forgive, said the Lord. The Buddha said, there is nothing to forgive. When Sariputra rose to go, and the Lord in his honor got up and stood up on the veranda of the Gandhakuti Vihar. See, the Lord of the Lords, the Buddha, got up and he stood up. So when Sariputra rose to go, the Lord in his honor got up and stood up on the veranda of the Gandhakuti Vihar. Now both are standing. Sariputra said to the Blessed Lord, you see, this is such a devotion. Sariputra is not a normal human being. He has transcended. What he says, I was happy when I saw you first. So when Sariputra saw for the first time the Buddha, he was happy. And what he says, I am happy to see you now. As I see you now, as I behold you now, I am happy to see you now. I know this is the last darshan of you I am having. I shall not have your darshan again. That's what the Sariputra expresses, his love, his devotion to the Buddha. And the verse number 12 is very interesting. Joining together the palms of his hand, he walked away without showing his back to the Blessed Lord. Now, this is the practice that we Buddhists have to practice. Whenever we bow to the image of the Buddha, we are not supposed to show our back to the Buddha, isn't it? There are a lot of practices which have come up. But this is very interesting. Whenever we are meeting some special person, we don't show them our back. We walk backwards with our hands folded. And that's what Sariputra did to the Buddha. Joining together the palms of his hand, he walked away without showing his back to the Blessed Lord. Then the Blessed Lord said to the assembled brethren, see what, there were a lot of people when this was happening. This was not happening in some kind of a private room. It was happening in the public. And then the Blessed Lord said to the assembled brethren, follow your elder brother. See what the Buddha is saying. Follow your elder brother. And the assembly for the first time left the Blessed Lord and went after Sariputra. You just visualize the scene that what might have conspired there. Sariputra, on reaching his village, died in his home in the very room in which he was born. So the stupa that stands today in Nalanda is the same place where Sariputra might have born and Sariputra might have been cremated. Now, this verse number 15 is very important. He was cremated and his ashes were taken to the Blessed Lord. On receiving the ashes, the Blessed Lord said to the brethren, he was the wisest. He had no acquisitive instinct. His Trishna was gone. He was energetic and industrious. He hated sin. Yea, brethren, see his ashes. You see his ashes. This is here the Sariputra is in the reduced to ashes. He was as strong as the earth in his forgiveness. He used to forgive the people like the earth. He never allowed anger to enter his mind. He was never controlled by any desire. He had conquered all his passions. He was full of sympathy, fellowship, and love. This is how the Buddha describes about Sariputra. And Ananda was very close to Sariputra. And he, of course, missed Sariputra so much. And he told the Buddha that he is missing Sariputra so much. And there is a teaching where the Buddha says that, do not miss Sariputra. Though his mortal coil is gone, though his body is gone, his Dhammo body remains. The body made up of Shil, Samadhi, Prajna, and the freedom, Vimukti. And the Buddha says that build a stupa on the ashes of Sariputra, so that you will not miss the Sariputra. And this is what the Buddha has done for the enlightened beings, because, to remember their Dhamma body, to remember their body of the Shil, Samadhi, Prajna, and Vimukti. The Buddha has, created these stupas. So about that time, Mahamoglan was then living in a solitary vihar near Rajagraha. So that time in Rajagraha, Mahamoglan was living. And he was murdered by some assassins employed by the enemies of the Blessed Lord. So Mahamoglan was murdered, he was killed. The sad news of his end was conveyed to the Blessed One, Sariputta and Mugalan, Mahamoglan, where his two chief disciples. And their relics are also found in Sanchi. So very interesting, Sachi, and there is a nearby place called Machi, and there is Sarumaru. These two were remarkable. They might have traveled to the Ujjain, Vidisha, and all over the places to teach the Dhamma of the Buddha. And they were both dear to the Buddha, Sariputra and Mahamoglan, where his two chief disciples, they were called Dharma Senapati, defenders of the faith. The Blessed Lord depended upon them to continue the spread of his gospel. The Blessed Lord was deeply affected by their death in his lifetime, because they were elderly people, but when they died, the Buddha was very sad. He was deeply affected. And he did not like to stay in Shravasti, and to relieve his mind, he decided to move on. You see, even the Buddha, if your near and dear ones leave, you cannot but be sad. The Buddha is often depicted, in the qualities which are sometimes, borders to the inhumanity. The Buddha was a man who felt for others. He felt for his near and dear ones. He was such a profound teacher that comes through when we read the Buddha and His Dhamma. We can immediately connect it with the Buddha, the human Buddha that walked on this very earth among the human beings. And I find these ending parts very important, because they are not just about teaching, they are also about faith. They are also about cultivating the feelings of the positive feelings, which are harmless, where they lead to the highest possibilities. So I will stop here, and the part 1 is finished here today, and we will continue to study part 2 in the next class. And we will open up a class for any discussion or any comments from any of you. So anything from anybody?
In last meeting between mother and son, and between wife and husband,
Yes.
Yashodhara did not ask for the permission to die. Instead, she said that I'm my own refuge.
Yes.
So this is remarkable, because she became arhat, it seems. She was free from all the passions.
Yes. Very true.
Jai Bhim, sir.
Jai Bhim?
Sir, who killed Mughlayan?
It is said that the Jainas killed the Mahamughlayan.
Okay.
So the Jainas had a rivalry with the Buddhist monks, and apparently the Jainas instigated his killing. And we have seen that there was a rivalry between the Jainas and the Buddhas in the past classes, right? So the Jaina was assassinated by the Jainas.
Okay.
In part 4, verses 8, 9, 10, 11 teach Brahma Vyas, Karuna, Maitri, Mudita, and Upekka. And verse 13 teaches impermanence, perception of the fleeting nature of the things.
Yes.
So in each sentence, it gives message. Every word, every sentence in this book, there is a lot of meaning.
Yes. Anything else?
Jai Bhim, sir.
Yes.
This chapter, which I have covered today, it feels so emotional and feels so moving to me, and the way Buddha felt for them. He was deeply affected by their death of Sariputta and Moggallana in his lifetime. So he did not like to stay in the Shravasti and decided to move on. So it was moving, those lines. Yeah, so I feel that, and also feel that those were warriors that they never fear the death in their life. Like, for example, in this whole chapter, it talks about how mother and Yashodhara and Mahapraja Gautami take the permission from the Buddha. Not Yashodhara, she was self-reliant, but then whole chapter talks about how they they don't have any fear of death.
Yes.
And even if they achieve the higher higher stage of their life, they are enlightened being, but then there is no fear of death, that they die so happily, like Sariputta, and then also Yashodhara, Mahapraja. I think that quality is so important. I think whenever we are on the last stage of life, I think we always have a fear. We always have something in our mind that comes up, that, oh, I haven't forgiven that person. I haven't forgiven that person. I have done this thing. I have done that thing. And there is no such things in all of their mind. Yashodhara or Mahaprajapati or Sariputta. And then they really died happily by seeing the Buddha touching their feet and falling on their feet. I think that's a beautiful quality those things have. They're able to see the Buddha before they die. And wow, it's so moving. Thank you.
Good, Shashank. Very good. So if there are no further reflections, we will end up our class today and we will meet next week.
JB, I am having one small doubt.
Yes.
This I have written there. Sometimes speaking truth also harms others. So in that case,
So there is a criteria for that, whether that is the right time to tell the truth. Okay, so there, if it is truth, we have to find the right time, and we also decide if speaking the truth is going to be beneficial.
yeah, sometimes it may harm us only if we don't tell that truth.
Yes, so you have to see, you have to judge whether the
It's
time
like
is right.
Yeah, it's like a catch-22 situation.
Yes. So you have to see, whether it's going to be for the larger good. There is a criteria, larger good. The Bahujan Hitaya, Bahujan Sukhaya. Isn't it? So 3 things: truth, whether it's going to be useful to speak the truth, and the third thing is, the time, whether it's the right time to tell the truth. Okay, so there are 3 criteria given by the Buddha. Whenever, we just don't tell the truth just like that, isn't it? So we reflect whether this is going to be useful to tell the truth, and whether this is the right time to tell the truth.
But truth told at any time it hurts someone. If it is not acceptable, I mean.
Now you
Sir.
see, just to give you an example, Sudhir Bhau, is, if you are finding somebody ugly, you don't tell them that you are ugly, right?
Yes.
Do you tell them that, you don't like them?
No, no. No, suppose there is a situation where a thief catches me and he asks me, tell about your so-and-so XYZ friend where he has hidden his most important asset, most valuable asset. And the fact is that I know that friend where he has kept his valuable asset. So if I am not telling the truth, then that thief will kill me there only on the
So
spot.
you have to reflect, that telling the truth or untruth is not absolute in Buddhism. Reflection. You reflect. He's immediately going to kill you. You wait, for that treasure. Does my killing is justified? Is my killing justified? That's why the reflection, what the Buddha taught to Sariputra, reflect. It's not black and white. There is the middle ground, reflection, pradnya. Even while we give something, we have to have pradnya. We have to reflect while giving. We just don't give anything just like that. There is no premium on stupidity in Buddhism. The Buddha castigated people like that. If we just do everything mindlessly, just practicing the norms, is not. So you have to weigh, what is at that situation, what does that situation demands, So that's why you have the power of reflection, right? So anything else, Umesh bhai?
सर सत्य भी 3 तरीके से देखा जा सकता है। एक मेरा सत्य, एक आपका सत्य और एक सत्य। तो उसके 3 आयाम होते हैं। they are having 3 phases of the truth. तो as you said कि it's rightly we have to weigh कि how and at the larger context it is.
Right. See, actually, let's not make it very complicated. For example, the truth. Now, what is the truth of this? This is if I raise my pen here, and I tell you that, this is pen. And Alka madam also looks at this pen and she says there is a pen. Vidyanand, everybody, Shashank, Pankaj, everybody says that is a pen, and somebody is saying that this is not pen. Isn't it? So it's when we live in a sensory consciousness, we have certain things that we share in common, right? So for example, any of you don't see the ghost, but I say that this is the ghost. There is a ghost in the room, but nobody sees it. Isn't it? So you see, that's what is important here. That's one level of telling the truth. Isn't it? Otherwise, we will be having, psychosis. The other level of telling the truth is by our own experience. We know it and it's demonstrable to others. Isn't it? For example, the Buddha was enlightened and he demonstrated to others that, they can also be enlightened. And he showed the clear path how they can be enlightened, right? So, there is nothing untruth about it, but somebody is speculatively telling you that, I give you this mantra, I give you this formula and you will be enlightened. Isn't it?
I would like to add that perception of truth also depends. We should also use scientific temperament in that.
Yes.
Because as Baba Sahib Ambedkar has written in the article 51AH,
Yes.
that it is very necessary to have scientific temperament, and that is derived from Buddhism itself.
Yes, evidence. We need evidence of everything, even the evidence of enlightenment, right?
Correct.
Now, the fundamental truth that we all experience is the truth of suffering. In our own ways, we suffer by this or that, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Right.
So instead of going for the speculative truths, let's concentrate on the fundamental truth of that we all experience from time to time, right?
Absolutely, sir.
The truth of suffering, the truth because of the structures, the truth because the suffering because of certain social conventions, right?
Absolutely correct, sir.
And that cuts across everybody, every human being. So I think we can go on discussing, but I think this is a very fruitful discussion. We should have it, and we can continue to discuss this in the coming classes. We will end here today, and see you in the next class, all of you.
Thank you, sir. Jai Bhim.
Jai Bhim, Namo Buddhaya.
Maybe.